Hey, Moonbeams. I want to wish you a happy Sagittarius season. We are finally here, out of Scorpio season, into the sparkly lights of Sag, at least for some of us. Um, I know that a lot of you have signed up for the Sag season workshop, the Sun season one. And I wanted to do a quick video kind of going over how that workbook works, because you've had questions. But I also want to say that it's going to change in Capricorn season a little bit from this video, which is why I decided to share this video with everyone, in the main feed rather than just in the workbook. I wanted to let everyone know that there is a workshop that comes with the workbook, and kind of go over like, why would you want to sign up for that? At the same time, it gives me an opportunity to kind of roll back to the beginning. Capricorn season will be a year that I've been in the community network since I created it, I guess. But I've been doing these workbooks for years, mostly for myself. And then a little while longer, I did some in my Patreon group that I had for a little while. That's kind of where I started formatting it and sharing it so that other people could use this system that I created, that I use for myself every day. I use these workbooks in my journals every day, and I have for years. And that's how I actually learned astrology, but mostly my own astrology. It doesn't help me as much as an astrologer as it does to help me read my own chart and understand my own chart and how it affects my life. So before I go into the description of the workbook and kind of go over the pages, I'm going to say a couple things. The first one is that this will be probably about an hour-long video by the time it's all said and done. And I just want to start with that. So watch it when you have time, because I get a little long. This is why I don't make a lot of videos, even though everyone's like, make videos. We love your videos. Because I'm just very... I have a lot of words. I have Mercury in Capricorn. Okay, you guys, I have a lot of words. I have a lot of things to say. That's the first thing. So you're forewarned. Watch it at in your own time. Second, I want to just really, 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 really drive this home. Astrology is an extremely complicated, complex language of its own. And I know people are frustrated sometimes when this isn't something that they can just learn in 90 days. And there are a lot of people who learn astrology in 90 days and have a lot of YouTube followers or Instagram followers or write a lot of blogs. I've actually had writers reach out to me about blogs they were writing about astrology just so I could like check it, when they clearly did not know anything about astrology. So it is a thing that you can boil way down, and it is a language of symbols and archetypes and myths and stories, that doesn't have a lot of boundaries and a lot of rules, in the sense that it's not supposed to. It's not meant to. It's an interpretive, intuitive tool. It is not magic on its own. It's just a tool. And then the person who interprets it or reads it or who takes the time to think about it is doing magic with this tool. The same way that tarot cards are not magic on their own. If somebody who doesn't know what they are looks at them, they're like, look at these weird cards with these weird pictures on them. I don't know what that means. You have to learn the language. You have to learn the context. But even if you just memorize what each card means, that there's a next level of integration that someone who is really dedicating the time and changing their lifestyle around reading tarot cards. Because if you get certain kinds of cards in a layout, it's like it becomes this more complicated thing. And astrology is like that, but times 1,000, because there's so much going on and there are these like parts that never stop moving. So I know people get frustrated and they tell me a lot that they feel overwhelmed by the workbooks, or they feel overwhelmed by what they're supposed to be doing. And they don't get it. And they've been doing it for a little while and they still don't get it. And I want to make sure that I'm being super clear about what you can learn about astrology, and like how to best do that. Because unless you are as obsessed with astrology as I am, I think about it all day. I read about it all day. I never stop thinking about it. I associate it with everything that I do. I don't recommend that, right, for your life, unless you want to be a professional astrologer, which if you do, I'm happy to help you find resources for that and to guide you on a path to that. But that's not what we're doing here. So if your goal is to be able to know enough about astrology to talk about it, to sound like you know what you're talking about, or to like weave it into something that you're already doing just enough, that's fine. It's just that you're just learning associations. Then you're just learning like the astro alphabet, and you're trying to like boil it down. And that is what most people understand about astrology, and that's how most people use it. Most modern astrologers are really just using these like keywords and this association alphabet to say this plus this equals this, and that's fine. But this process is about you learning about yourself. It's not about you getting smart enough about astrology to sort of chat about it with people, or to start giving other people feedback on what you think they have going on based on you've memorized all the signs. Oh, you're a Sagittarius, that means you're fun. No, it doesn't. That's not what that means. That's not how it works. So I just want to say that because I feel like really passionate about using astrology as a tool for our own self-exploration and our own understanding of ourselves and our own like healing, right? We're doing it for ourselves, though. We're not doing it for other people. We're not trying to understand other people. This is about learning about yourself. And so it's not a 90-day process. It is not a simple process, and it is not a predictive tool, meaning that after 30 days, you're going to know your future and you're never going to have a bad day and things are always going to be perfect, because that isn't how it works. Astrology can look at things and make some predictions about how it might feel or some things that might happen. But each one of us has a natal chart where we have planets frozen in us, right? It's like a snapshot. When we look at the chart, we're looking at a picture of us and the planets that were there when we were born. And so as the other planets move around that chart, they're pinging into it. Okay, they're impacting us. And so this is why when we say things like, oh, you're a Sagittarius, you're fun and free-willing, and the person's like, that's not true for me at all, then they don't believe astrology is real, right? They have a very sad reaction because that is not how they feel. And that happens because you're just talking about their sun, which is just one part, one very small part, and it's not more important or less important than the other parts. And sometimes people have a hard placement with that, right? They'll have another thing that's going on in the chart that you can't see because you're not an astrologer, because you're not looking at their chart, because you don't understand those other complexities, right? We're not going into those places in this work that we're doing. We're not trying to learn all of astrology so that we can read other people at cocktail parties and stuff. That I wouldn't do that anyways, with as much as I know. So I just want to reframe everyone's mind around that, because this is about you, and this is about you learning about yourself. And it does become predictive in some ways, but only after a lot of work. This is work. This does take a lot of work. It's a lifestyle. I like to say it's like a lifestyle, right? It's like the planners that have like a thing to them, you have to really dedicate yourself to getting in the flow of doing that, and having these rituals around it until you can see the patterns, which then become the thing that you can use as a predictive tool. Unfortunately, you have to do the work first though. And there is no answer. Like, even if I give you readings, I can't tell you how this is going to work from your chart, just from an hour or 2 hour long session. It doesn't work that way, because it's about you looking at your life and really giving it the value and looking at it as sacred as it is on a daily basis, an hourly basis sometimes. And noticing, like, when are you in these different moods? When are you in these different vibes? When are you sleeping well? When are you eating well? And obviously also a lot of that has to do with like other people's shit that is getting on us. So we have only a control over ourselves. And so the point of these is to track, to help you track and notice what is happening now. So being present in the now is the most important thing, keeping track of what is going on right now. And this isn't like, it doesn't have to be a 6 hours a day process. It can be just setting a timer for 15 minutes at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, whatever works, and saying, how am I feeling right now? How did today go? What was going on today? What was I frustrated by? What was working? How was everyone else doing? Were a lot of people irritated, right? Because we're looking at the planets and how they may be impacting everyone around us. So we're thinking about right now, and we're taking notes. And then in chunks of time, ideally every week, we get a different moon phase, we get a different big moon phase, and we're doing a different thing within this quarter of time, right? We're chunking out a big chunk of time. And the main thing that we want to do in that time is review those little notes of now. So we're going, oh, geez, look, okay, like this is how the week went. Where was the moon during those days? And we know the sun is in Sagittarius right now. So we've got this large bar of the sun. We've got these little chunks of the moon. And those two planets, which are actually called the luminaries, because they're not planets, right? Obviously, we know we go around the sun and the moon goes around us on Earth. And these two lights have a huge impact on us. We respond to them in a much different way than we do the other planets. And they're also they're also the most predictable and static. That's the word I'm looking for. Static parts, right? We go around the sun and we clock our whole lives by the sun, right? The sun moves a degree a day around the chart roughly, and it takes 360. Now I know we have this whole Gregorian calendar thing that's fucking stupid, but here we are, right? The round clock, it goes around, and then the moon goes around our chart in about a month, right? 28 days, same as a menstrual cycle. So those two things are pretty static and pretty reliable. We know they're doing things, and then they engage with each other constantly, because the moon without the sun is just this rock in the sky that we wouldn't even see if the sun wasn't hitting it just right. Right? Obviously it's our satellite, so it's pretty big. But it downloads the sun's energy to us as well. So while the moon is its own thing, the moon is constantly changing, just like us, right? So watching these, just paying attention to these two things at first is like what I like to call like learning to walk, right? Then we learn to run, then we ride a bike. We don't just we don't put a baby on a bike and be like, ta-da, right? And the same with learning. Like, you've got to look at these worksheets like you're going to kindergarten or pre-K even. Like, what is a pencil? What is a paper? What is a letter? What is a symbol? And you're learning a language, right? This takes a long time. And then you're learning the language through like the symbols and the rules and the codes and like all of these things. But you also are needing to learn the context, and you're needing to learn to adjust and unfuck your mind from the way you learned in school. If you're white in America, right? The way you learned in school, if you're not white in America, right? And the way you learned in school if you are from somewhere else. And I don't know how that worked, but like school has a pretty patriarchal, capitalistic way of making little robots out of us. That's its goal for the most part. There's not a lot of like, we resist, like we feel all that that comes down when we're looking at a worksheet. We're like, oh my God, I'm going to fail. Everyone's going to think I'm stupid. I don't get it. I'm getting an F on this. this isn't school. This is not, while I'm saying look at it like a for the kindergartner brain, it's more like it as a child, right? As someone who's trying to be playful and curious and is like, oh, I don't know what that means, but it doesn't mean you're stupid. It doesn't mean you're not good enough. It just means you don't understand it yet. So you need to keep going and keep listening and keep being curious and ask questions. Fuck. You know, I mean, I built this entire thing and I've had it for an entire year. And I keep saying, if you have questions, ask them. The best place to ask them is in the community. So posting questions right in the thing. Because if I don't answer, chances are some of the people who have been here for the whole year, who have worked with me a lot, who do know a little bit more about this workbook and this process will answer. If you're too shy, I get it. Send me a private message and I will post your questions anonymously if you don't want to share them with everyone. But I want to share your question because questions are the way in which we learn. And I can't even know what's happening if no one tells me. And a lot of you I know personally as friends, and you're just here supporting me and loving on me by being here. And I appreciate that. But that doesn't mean that you're engaging, and it doesn't mean that you're interacting with any of the content. So I don't always know, you know, if there are questions. I sometimes imagine people are just out there clicking away and having a great old time and no one has any feedback, good or bad. So it's really important for you to tell me how I can help you, what you're confused about, what else you need. Because I'm also looking at this like, you know, from the teacher's perspective of already knowing. And so sometimes I forget to break things down enough. So it's important for you to let me know what you need. And again, like I said, some of this stuff is going to be changing, not too much. Some of the format and the layout and the way it's delivered is changing. But I am tweaking some of the pages just based on feedback that the few of you who are actively doing this are giving me. And I will also say just one last thing, that I can see who is opening what and when people are logging in and when they're not ever logging in. And, you know, I know that there's not a ton of people who are utilizing these tools right now. And a lot of you have told me it's because it's too overwhelming for you. And so, you know, that's the main reason why I want to just keep saying, this is not a fucking homework assignment. This is not like, you're not going to get graded. There's no reason to feel pressured or overwhelmed. You know, do what makes sense, do what feels helpful, do what you want to do what feels good, reach out with lots of questions. And if you discover like, this is just never going to be something that you want to do, that's okay. Right. You don't have to feel guilty or bad or like, you know, it's not enough, that you're not doing enough, because there's no such thing. So I just want to keep saying that, especially as some new people have joined and they may not even had a chance to like dip their toes in here yet. That this is the reason why you would want to join the workbooks, why you'd want to join the workshop, sorry, is because you are feeling like you're ready to use this, to learn this tool for yourself and to use it as a way to know yourself better, and to plan your life around your own needs rather than doing a lot of coulda, shoulda, woulda bullshit that this culture puts on us all the time. Okay, I hope that helps. Let's get into it. Okay, here it is. So this is the Sagittarius season workbook printed out. I'm not going to go through how to get to the workshops and get to the pages, but if somebody wants to see that, let me know. I'm going to assume at this point, you know where the workshops are and you are subscribed and you are able to find this. So if you're not, post a comment below and let me know and I will show you how to get there. Okay, so this is, if you print it out from the printable version, you're going to get front and back page printing like this. And again, I want to say you can always just use them as digital prompts and use your own journals and workbooks for this, and just look at this on the screen and write this information in your own way. I print out the workbooks myself because I actually, they're formatted in a way that is also a useful tool. It's not just like some trivial thing These are actually formatted in a certain way. So I want to cover that first. So print this out and then notice that these are all formatted to be folded in this like weird half page situation. Let's look at that later. So this is just the workbook. It's just 3 pages. And it's formatted to be this little book. And so what ends up happening is over time, you end up with these books where you can print out the stuff that I'm sharing. You can print out your own pages. You can collage them. You can make art on them, right? And they're all set up to be formatted with this binder. You can hole punch it and bind it together because you want to be able to take it apart. Okay, so this is just a mock-up version of like last year's Aquarius season 1. But the reason is because this will be full of your notes. And when the moon is in Aquarius, I will grab this book of mine and I will open up to the page where the moon was in Aquarius season, and look at what was going on. So I'm like reviewing, oh gosh, and I will have like several of these over the years of Aquarius season, just looking at what was going on for me in my notes. And this, again, this is just a mock-up, so there's nothing written in here. This is just an example, but it would have like, oh, this is the chart of the Aquarius new moon. And I could look like what was going on last time. Guaranteed I was having dreams about aliens or something like that. These are the things I've learned over time by watching like what goes on for me during Aquarius season. I'm like freezing cold. I can never get warm. I basically could sit in a bathtub. These are the things that I have learned about myself. And then you can, if you want, you can take these apart and reorganize the pages so that you're just looking at all of the moon in Aquariuses in Aquarius season, the last few Aquarius seasons, if you want to. Now, you can permanently bind them together. You cannot bind them together at all, right? These are tools that are designed to become something that you can edit or alter so that it fits your needs, okay? But what I do is I use this handy dandy 2-hole puncher that I found at Salvation Army, right? Or you can just use a handheld punch as well. And I put these holes here. I also do it for the weekly worksheets. Okay. And then I use a little bindery clip. These guys, these little prong fasteners. And I don't use the back of it very often, or at least until it's all done. I just use this guy. Okay. And you just put this in here. Okay. So that's the first thing. But, do whatever you want to do. This is how they're designed because this is how I use them. Okay? So I'm going to go through each one of the pages. Let's open them up here. Okay? As if it was a book. So it's also designed to like stay together like this so that the pages go together. Right? But it's also designed, like I said, to be folded into a cute little workbook that you can carry around with you. Okay? So the first page, pretty self-explanatory. The cover, this gives you a good rundown of like just the basics, right? The astro alphabet of like associations for Sagittarius season. Ruler, element, the mode, this is how the energy moves. The 9th house, this is the house that it's associated with. It does not mean that you have Sag in the 9th or that they are the same. It just means that you will see that some of the keywords and different things that are happening relate to each other. So it gives us a sense of how they're related, but it does not mean they are the same. Okay. And then we have the chart drawing page. Now this page is going to change. Sorry, I'm having a problem getting this to behave itself. This is one of the pages that will shift a little bit. Okay, we won't be doing this in here anymore, so I'm not even going to go over it. But the point of this is that you need to draw your chart every day if you can, at least once a day. And we'll talk about that in the weekly sheets. But in this main one, you're going to draw what's going on for you during Sagittarius season. And if all you do is draw your chart and what you have in Sag, and then this is the sun is going to be transiting. So draw the sun here and color this in bright yellow and say, okay, well, this is where, or whatever color you want, that this is what is going to be really activated by the sun for you during this season. And so then you're just looking up the, 12th house, Sag in the 12th. You can Google it. But we'll talk a little bit later about how there's a keyword page in here that can help you. And all you're doing when you're doing this is just getting a sense of your chart and what it looks like. The more you draw it, the more it becomes like looking at yourself in the mirror. You know what your face looks like. You should be able to just picture your chart in your mind, so that if you're having a shitty time and you know where the moon is, you can be like, oh shoot, like, oh yeah, that's where I have a lot of planets, right? We want to start to remember it. It is a very important thing to know about ourselves. This is just a calendar. In the print version on the computer screen, you'll see this is red because there's an eclipse here. I just colored it red because I only have a black and white printer. But it doesn't have to be red. That just means there's an eclipse. That's the last eclipse in Sag and Gemini's polarities. So it's kind of a big deal. But it is a little bit of a baby eclipse, so not too excitable. We'll talk more about that. And it lists a couple of things, like I list when the planets change signs. I list when the moon moves in what time. I use military time because if you make a mistake with the AM PM in astrology, it makes a big, huge impact. It's also stupid. There's 24 hours in one of our days, so just use military time. I highly recommend learning it, getting used to it. It will help you if you get really serious about tracking things. Anything that becomes shorthand becomes very valuable. That's why learning the symbols. And again, I would say that for this too. Like, if you don't know the symbols, you can use the words until you know the symbols, but you definitely want to learn the symbols quickly. Like, that's where I would start. It's just like practicing writing them. It's just, this wouldn't even work if I was writing all the words out, or they would be like so tiny. So this is just like also to show you that, again, we use these like square calendar things because we made up stuff. Like, someone just decided, some dude just decided the first of the month was gonna be on this day, when actually this could be the first of this month or the first of Sag. Right? And instead of having November, December split in half, we would just have the month of Sagittarius, or the season of Sagittarius, and this would be Sagittarius 1 to 28. But we don't, and so we have to like sort of figure out a way to merge that information together for you, and that's what this is doing in a format that you understand. It also lists the moon, the 4 and 5, including dark moon phases. And then I list when planets station retrograde or station direct, or enter their shadows. I put that on here as well. And again, if you don't understand it and you're like, the fuck am I going to do with this? Don't worry about it. It's nothing. Just ignore it. It doesn't mean anything. This worksheet will be leaving the sun season workshop and moving to the moon ritual workshop because it's about the moon. There'll be like a shortened kind of version of it in here just to show you where the moons are, kind of like what this is doing. It's just kind of giving you like oh, hey. But this shows you like the date, the time, that it's exactly going to be that moon phase. So that's when the sun and the moon are at that exact degree to each other, what sign it's in, and what element that is. And again, this is all decoded here on this keyword sheet, which has all the symbols for each thing, planets, signs, elements, blah, 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 blah. And then a place for you to write your own keywords. I definitely recommend continuing to do your own research, write in the words that resonate for you, for each one of the signs and planets, things that you want to know about these. They go together, right? These are the houses, right? They share association. So you can start to make your own notes here. Or make your own larger one if you are really into it. Because the books are good, but I will say that a lot of the astrology books, especially if they're from before, the last 2 or 3 years, they're bypassing the darks of the signs. They're skipping the shadows. They maybe put like 1 or 2 words about, the negative thing about those signs, because we all want to believe that the signs are us. And so we only want to talk about the positives of it, and that really harms. It's white supremacy, basically trying to make it white and shiny and bright and clean and happy for everyone. And then you get nothing out of it because you're like, I'm a Sag, I'm always happy. But not all Sagittariuses are always happy. Some of them are really deeply sad or deeply dark because they're thinking about all of the big things in the world And when we're in a world like we are right now, that can be really hard. Sagittarius is in a pandemic where they're locked down, are not happy. They're not feeling good. And so we lose sight of being able to validate that for them and to be able to give them good resources for like ways to feel better that will really work for them, because we're like constantly just trying to make it neat and tidy and pretty. So the more you do research, you know, about things in more current times and work with astrologers who aren't afraid to talk about the hard stuff in the world, the better you're going to get at understanding astrology in general. Okay. So this is the weathers page. This part is a continuation of the keywords. Just want to point that out because there wasn't enough room. This is already so tiny. There wasn't enough room to talk about the associations here. So I'm sorry, the aspects. That's what these are. So this is how the planets see each other. And again, this is kind of astro level 3. So don't worry about it if it doesn't mean anything to you. I'm just telling you why it's there. You'll get there eventually. Okay, and these are the transits of the planets. There's also the moon, the 4 moon phases on here, but this is mostly like what the planets are doing during this 28-day period. Oh, look, this was edited and still more and more typos. I constantly keep finding them. Fun. Okay, so I'll figure out what that's supposed to be and fill that in. Sorry about that. There should be a date there. So this lists all the planets by symbol, and then it writes it out in the same, but in our language. So this is just a great way just to read through this as practice to start to learn the symbols, right? Because you can be like, what does that mean? Mercury enters Sag. That says Mercury enters Sag. This is like really long. This is a lot of stuff. What does this freaking mean, right? Saturn in Aquarius, sextile Chiron, which is retrograde in Aries. So if nothing else, it can give you this great like learning tool. The main thing I tell people about this page, if they're new and they're not really sure what to do with it, is the cool thing is if you're having a weird day and you're feeling a lot and you're having a hard time or a lot is going on, or if you're having a great time but you're like, what the hell? And you just check this and you look and you're like, oh my gosh, look at all these things that are going on. Right? It's like, oh, okay, I could Google these things. You could use the community, again, like I said, for what it's for, and post a question. Like, there's a lot of things going on. I'm having a lot of things. Why is this making me so kooky? Why is this making me feel so many feels? And then we can look at your chart. We can be like, oh, well, where do you have these planets? And show me your chart, and I'll answer your question. You can private message me, and I'll answer. You can also go back to this page and draw that into your chart. Well, Venus is in Capricorn and you have a bunch of planets and Capricorn is your rising sign and it's conjunct Pluto. Well, yeah, you're going to feel this transit more than other people. And again, this is like the next level, but the only way that we can learn it is to start to look at it through ourselves. I would say it's the best way to learn it, because then we're like, oh my gosh, like this is actually real. It's happening to me. I felt that. Or like another good example is like, you know that your child or spouse or coworker has a lot of Capricorn in their chart, or maybe they're just a Capricorn sun and they're being they're like having a day and you're like, what the hell? And then you can come look at this sheet and be like, oh crap. Okay, well, that makes sense. Plus these aspects all together on one day, this is going to be a day that was going to be a thing, because there's a lot of stuff going on. And you know, it's more complicated than that, but this is just like, again, preschool level. And make notes, utilize this space, just write down in as briefly as you can what you noticed about certain things, because you're going to come back to this next Sagittarius season or in Capricorn season when the moon is in Sagittarius. You're going to be like, oh my god, it's happening again, or that I went through that in Sagittarius season, like what did I say about it? And all of these spaces are here for you to be able to write these things down so that you can remember them. So brevity, you know, doing this as a like knowing that you're going to come back to read it. This isn't where you write 800 things about the day, right? You can have a journal that goes along with this that has lots of space for that. Okay. And this connects to a worksheet in the weekly sheets. So that's what these are. So there are usually five of these packets saved in each one of the seasons. And they're pretty much the same, but you want to print one for each week. So you can go ahead and do each one ahead of time, print them out ahead of time, or you can print them each week. It's up to you. The only difference is this page. So if you look at it, again, I'm assuming everyone's in there. So if you look at the workshop sections, there's weekly sheets, and then there's quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4, and quarter X, because there's always a week, because we don't have weeks in astrology, that has an extra packet. Okay, the only difference is the element for each one, and that element will be the same as the element of that moon. So, well, okay, again with the editing, but whatever, it doesn't matter. You can print the same one over and over again if you don't care about that. These are the things that I just get hung up on, and they don't matter. So we're going to draw our chart at least every week. Now, I draw my chart every day because I think about this all the time. If you can get to the point where you're drawing your chart every day, or every week, sorry, then you're going to learn so much, right? I recommend literally drawing it in here every single week, and getting in the habit of doing it. And it's going to be, because it's different for each person, and it's going to be uniquely your chart. So the more you draw it, and the more you have to keep going and looking and remembering what each one of those things are, one day you'll just draw it and you won't look at that cheat sheet anymore. And you'll be like, oh my God, I know my chart. So great. And you don't have to know the degrees necessarily for everything right away, just that you have, you know, Saturn in Cancer, and, you know, Venus in Capricorn, right? And you're just able to see them. Now, the degrees will become more important as you move through and you get used to it, because you'll start to go like, oh gosh, the eclipse is happening in Taurus and it's at 11 degrees or something, and I have my sun at 11. Like, okay, that's a big deal. It's a bigger deal, I should say. It makes it much more impactful. And you can print the same one, these sheets, for every week, because they're blank down here. So then you're coming in here and you're adding, it's a Sagittarius, so Sag Sun season, the quarter 1, this is 2021, and then you would put the week in, so this would be 11/22 through whatever, through the Sunday. I do Monday through Sunday. You can do whatever you want as far, if you do Sunday through Saturday, like some kind of weirdo. Just kidding, love you. But that would be what I would put here, right? And then you're drawing in your chart and you're just taking notes about what you notice, right? And then if you want to, this is where you can add these transits in, right? Especially if you know you have a lot going on. So that would be for this first week. So you can see Mercury's entering Sagittarius. So you would put like Mercury right here, just as it starts to enter. Okay, and I use this ring for the moons. So then I'm like, okay, well, what's the moon this week? The moon this week is in Virgo. So the moon would be in Virgo. And again, if you want, you can come here and get the degrees and get really serious about it. It's at 5 degrees, so it'd actually be kind of like way over here. And it's last quarter moon, right? And let's say I have, you know, my sun here at 5 degrees. I'm like, oh crap. Okay, this moon is going to be like right on top of my sun. What kind of magic could I do with that? And I have this in the 9th house. So this just starts to give us the language that we need to be able to look that up, right? Otherwise, we don't know what we're looking for. It's like if you type in last quarter moon in Virgo conjunct my sun in Virgo, chances are you're going to get something from that, okay? But you can also ask the question, hey, I noticed that the last quarter moon in Virgo, because I have the language, is on top of my sun in Virgo. You can, that's a question. I'd be like, oh, interesting. Well, let's break that down, right? But there's also a worksheet in here to help you break that down yourself, which, you know, is part of the process. And so each week you're going to come in here and you can use parts or all or just one section of this. Again, it's not homework. It's not, you don't have to fill out the whole thing. And if it doesn't make sense, especially at the beginning, then just skip it. Okay? The main thing about this is writing down where the moon will be during this week. Well, where do I get that information? Well, you get it from hopefully some kind of app that you're using or some kind of website that you're using to track the moon regularly. Want to know about that? Post a question and I will give you lots of options on how to set them up. But you can also use the moon scopes that I post, right? So each time the moon changes signs, I'm adding the moon's information. So you can wait to do it when those are posted. But this week is Cancer, Leo, Virgo. Okay, so now we're going to go to that keyword worksheet and we're going to write down keywords for Cancer. We're like, oh, okay, there's the Cancer. It says, sorry, this is really tiny, you can't see in the video, but it says home, nurturing, nostalgic, clannish, protective, and fearful. So you're going to choose what resonates the most for you out of those words, or get a book, Google Cancer keywords, right? Choose the things that resonate the most for you. Home, nurturing. Okay. And then I'm going to look at my chart, right? For me, the moon will go through these houses because it's not going to be the same for everyone. So when I look at my chart, I can see that that means the moon is going through the 7th house. So I'm going to put 7th. There's no glyph for that. It's just the 7th. And again, going to the keyword worksheet, if I don't already know them, I'm going to go to the keyword sheet and I'm going to be 7th house is relationships, partnerships, obligations to others, contracts, agreements, and marriage as if it were a contract. Right? Marriage is not loving in the 7th. It's more like who's doing what chores and who pays the bills. So I'm going to put contracts and obligations. Okay, and whatever words resonate for you. And then I'm going to look and see, it says, I also have these planets here too. So what planets do I have in the sign of Cancer? Right, and I have Saturn here, right? And I may have several. So you might have to do this in another sheet if you have like 5 or 6 planets there, okay? But I just have Saturn. So we're going to put Saturn. And again, I can go back to this page and look at Saturn keywords. We can say Saturn's keywords are tradition, patriarchy, structure, law and order, capitalism, control, and nationalism. Now you'll notice Saturn has 2 sections because Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius. So I always read both when I'm just talking about the planet because we're not differentiating. So this also says builder, boundaries, time, wise leader, socialism, fanatic, resonates with your, oh, sorry. That's Aquarius. It also resonates with Uranus. So fanatical, Saturn can get a little bit rigid, like the priest, you know, that like doesn't let it go. So we want to write the keywords that resonate the most for us. So boundaries and structures. So then I'm going to take these words, and again, you can do this in a notebook or in a scrap sheet of paper, but you're basically just going to start playing with these words to make a sentence out of them. Okay? And the houses are kind of like where this happens, right? So like, where does this story take place? Where does the sentence take place? And in the 7th house, it's like how we relate to other people. So what I'm getting from this is like, especially related to this particular week, being that a lot of people have family obligations and we're all experiencing the moon in Cancer, right? And the moon in Leo and the moon in Virgo this week. So we can say like, I'm only going to focus on nurturing obligations or nurturing relationships that I have with people. And I'm going to set boundaries around all the relationships that aren't nurturing or don't feel like home. Right? I'm not going to go hang out with my racist relatives. I just am not going to do that this year. So this can actually give me the strength to say no thank you to that, right? So this week, my sentence for Cancer is saying no to obligations that are not nurturing. And it's going to be whatever you want it to be. This could turn into a freaking 6-page journal entry. And that's fine. If I go to my journal then and I note in my journal the date I wrote it and the moon sign even, I can do all of the like heady, detailed layers of writing about this. All of this worksheet is doing is summarizing and helping you to like create an outline for how that can work. And the main reason that's helpful is because when you come back to look at this next year, this won't be the same. Like we won't have the week won't have the same moon phases, but we can track to that and we can be like, oh my gosh, last year in Sag season, when the moon was in Cancer, Leo, and Virgo, I was doing all of this work. And here I am the next year going, oh, I'm doing the same work. I haven't done any healing around that. Or God, I did that and it was great, right? So this gives you space for 2 sentences. You can make a longer one or you can do 2 separate. And sometimes when you have several planets, you need more space. But you're just going to repeat that process for each moon in a week. And there's usually never ever more than 4. Sometimes it happens, but not really, because then that would mean that one of these moons was only here for like a couple of minutes or hours. The moon moves through each sign in about 2 to 2.5 days. So that's how we get about a week out of this. Okay. And then there are all these other prompts that you can use if they make sense. Themes, like if you start to see a theme between these, or you're looking at just like, the moon is going to move through this section of my chart, which is about other people and how we relate and communicate and share resources with other people. Like, that chunk of the chart is about that. And again, I don't expect you to just know these things, right? This is stuff that comes through practice and through just listening to me give these long lectures, and using the moon scopes. And then if you're really starting to feel like you want to know more, sign up for the Astro 101 class. You get that workshop eternally. You always have access to it. It changes, it grows. There's still stuff that hasn't even been finished as we are working through it. So it's a live, constantly evolving space where we can keep learning together. And it might be the thing that you're looking for if you're feeling like you really want to go there. And if you don't need this, don't write anything here. That's okay. You can see good activities for each of the moons this week. So a good activity for Cancer moon is cooking, cleaning your house, right? Which we're probably, if we are going to celebrate these patriarchal holidays, still, if that's something that you're still wanting to do or you're trying to get together, this can be really good moon energy for this particular season of the holidays. But it's also a good time for resting, right? Sometimes people have changed these too, as just like they're keeping a theme going to learn better. So sometimes you can just put like colors to wear or types of clothing to wear or food to eat, good activities. Just keep it the same for each one for a while because you're going to learn more. And again, if you don't know and you don't want to fill that out, then don't. It's okay. It also gives you a place to make an affirmation if you want to for the week, based on the signs, based on kind of what you learned here about things that you could do with this energy, or just generally, doesn't have to be astrological. Things that might be challenging. So if I know that it's really hard for me to set boundaries with family, I can be like, oh, this might be hard, right? I'm going to have to struggle with my family this week a little bit and really think about those things. And same with the work. Like, is that something I need to do though? Does it cause me a lot of grief to be around these folks? That's some of the work that I need to do for this week. And again, these will really help you when you come back and pull this apart and start laying out all the Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Moon pages that you have and seeing that you're kind of always doing similar hard work over the months. And that can show you like places where you can get help, right? I can't do this on my own. I've been trying to do this on my own and I can't do it. How can I get help for these challenging things? How can I get help to get better tools for doing this work? With these particular moon signs, which equates to these signs in our chart. Okay? And then there's always, you'll notice a lot of my worksheets always have a space to come back and do review work. There's actually a review page that comes at the end of the season where you can go back and review the season as a whole. Review is the most important thing, because that, if you never come back and look at this, which we often do with our journals, that's why when we go back and read them years later, we're like, I don't even remember what I was talking about when I wrote this page. We also tend to only write when we're angry or upset about something, and we don't tend to get our journals out and be like, that was the best day I've ever had because of blah, blah, blah. This kind of forces you to look at it in these tiny little chunks that way, so that you're also looking at like, God, this was a great week. I had a great week. Does this happen every time the moon is in these signs? And you go back and look at several seasons of pages and you're like, it does. God, I'm always in such a good mood when the moon's in Leo, right? Or whatever. That way that's when we can start planning, because guess what? There's always a calendar that shows us each season and into infinity at this point when the moons will be in Leo. And so I can look ahead at the Leo moons in my calendar and be like, I am always in such a great mood. And I'm so happy during this time. I always feel strong, whatever it is. Then I can plan things on these 2 days. Well, this is when I'm going to, do that thing that I'm really excited about. Or I'm going to take these days for myself and go have fun with me. Whatever it is, right? That's when it becomes predictive, is after we've tracked it regularly. And we're trying to come up with these systems for doing that. Okay? So again, don't do it if it doesn't make sense. If you need help, ask questions. You're going to want to come in here and again, put this title in so that you remember what week this is. It's always going to be the same for each week. And these are, again, next week's sheets are the same. So the only way you're going to differentiate them is to write in the bottoms here. Okay. And then this last sheet is kind of new. And so most of you probably haven't even seen it, or some of you have asked me to give instructions because you don't know how to use it, and that's what I'm going to do now. So this is a way of kind of doing the same thing that you're doing here with the keywords and making little sentences and trying to figure out what does this mean for me. But we're using the transit sheet. So this week, here we are. So this is, we're not doing all of them. We're just doing this few days that fit in the day range. And so we're going to write down these transits on the sheet, and then do a very similar thing. So in this case, we have Mercury enters Sag. So you can do that one if you want to, but I'm going to do one that makes a little more sense with the format because it's a little different. Saturn is going to sextile, that's the glyph key, the little thing, and Chiron. Okay. So this is small, I know, so use your journals if you need extra space, but I'm trying to teach you to really narrow it down for the sake of reviewing. If we make things really complicated and it's like pages and pages of notes to review, you won't do it. And that's what your journals are for, right? Figure out what this looks like into a sentence and then write a fucking novel about it if that's what you want to do. But you won't review that novel next year, because you'll look at that novel and you'll be like, oh my God, I don't have time to read all this, and probably can't anyway, because it's like, your handwriting and you don't know what you're talking about. This gives you a way of like breaking it down into a very simple thing so that next year and times later, because this does get more complicated in the fact that these won't be exactly the same next year, but these transits may happen again, or similar transits may happen again, and you can go back to these pages and be like, oh, that's what that meant for me. But also, this is more real time, like what is going on right now today that may be hard for me or weird for me. So we're going to the keyword sheet, and we're just going to write in the keywords for this. So Saturn again. We've got the tradition, the boundaries. Okay, so I'm going to put traditions this time, just because. And then keywords for this glyph is sextile. Okay, and there's not a lot of keywords. You can also Google more, but I call this vibing sweetly. And that just means that they like see each other in like a, oh hey, friendly way, but nothing really happens in a tense way, or like nothing happens at all if we don't notice it. So we pay a lot of attention to the harsher aspects in our culture because they make things happen, and we're more likely to do stuff when we're uncomfortable or when we're forced to do it than when we look at something and go, oh, here's an opportunity I could do this now if I wanted to. I'm going to go ahead and do it. That's more like what a sextile and the trine, which is the little triangle one, does for us. Okay? So keywords for Chiron. And again, you have to sort of like pick these out. There it is. Chiron. Chiron is the wounded healer, a mentor, and a teacher. It's also like a place where we find healing for our wounds, right? So I'm going to put wounded, just because I'm going to help with the sentence, but wounded healer even. And the wounded healer part just means that like this is where we have wounds, and then ultimately we turn those wounds into ways that we help other people or ourselves sometimes as well. Okay? So I'm going to start playing around with like what could this mean for me? And then, you know, if I want to go next level, and for the person who wants this video made, I'm sure the next level is a part of this. I can also look at where these are in my chart. So Saturn is here, and Chiron is here, and Chiron is currently retrograde. Saturn is moving forward, right? And so I can then also add in my house keywords if I want to. So the 2nd and the 4th house in this case are also vibing sweetly to each other. So I could put keywords for those here. And I play around with that until I start making sentences. Again, if this doesn't make sense, or you're like, why would I want to do this? Don't do it. It's not time for you to do it yet. You start thinking at this level after you've done this for a while with the moon, and you start to notice what the vibes are for you in those houses and those signs. And then when the planets, because this is about the planets that are still moving around in the sky, around and around and around our chart. So they don't really mean much to us, and they don't do as much to us for lots of variable reasons. But like if you don't have any planets in your natal chart in either one of these signs, and so these aren't hitting anything and they're not bumping anything, then you're probably not going to notice that transit too much, right? Planetary transits also don't always have an impact on us. If that's not a planet that's super active in our chart for us at the time, we might not notice anything, but nothing is valuable still, right? Same as if we're moving through this process and we come back to review and we're like, oh, nothing happened. Oh, cool. Well, then that means it may mean that you have a chill time during these signs. That's kind of important to know, right? Or if you go like, oh, I didn't even fill this out all the way because I was so busy and I was running around, and now I feel guilty that I do my homework. But you did your homework, because the note would be when you come back to review, God, I was really busy. Why was I busy? Well, I was busy because my kid was sick. Work was crazy, da 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 da. And then look at these and see like, oh, this is my work house. This is my kid house, right? Is that happening every single time? Because then, you know, the only time I'll be able to check this is next season when we come back to these moon signs. If you're fucking busy again, it's like, oh, okay, gosh, I'm always busy during these moon signs. And again, it's going to be different for everyone. And it's not always going to align with the keywords, because we are all different. The keywords are just there as guides. You know, we also, just like with language, you know, we know words mean certain things. But if I just say the word rain, you don't know if I'm talking about the rain outside or the reign of a king or the reign of a horse, right? Until you get the context. And so it's very similar to that, where you're trying to understand better based on what happened, how you reacted, how you felt, what you did with that experience. And then when you start to see the patterns, that's when you can come back and be like, oh, I'm hectically busy during these moon signs. Oh, here they are on the calendar. So do I plan a ton of random extra stuff during this particular week? No. If I have that much control over my schedule, that is, I know not everyone works for themselves and, you know, has the privilege of just like deciding not to do stuff. But you can take extra care of yourself. You can not work double shifts. You can tell your boss, oh, sorry, I have other stuff going on that week. I can't work 40 fucking hours this week. I'm a part-time job. Because I'll get real tired. I'll feel really like mad and frustrated because I didn't get the other things done that I wanted to do, right? This is a measure of like your self-care. Like, oh, now I know that I get hectic busy. I will try to not add extra stuff, right? But this week is chill and I am very focused normally during these moons. And so I can add the extra things onto those days. So if you are a person who works for themselves and you have a calendar that has a lot of like appointments and you get to decide when to open appointments, suddenly you can start being like, well, I just don't work with clients that week at all because it's just too crazy. And I do lots of client work this week, and this week is average, and this week is a busy, you know, we get to see this picture. And sometimes that shifts over time, so we're always tweaking it, obviously. But I promise you, after years of doing it, you get a very clear picture of like your energetics, right? And you are trying to center yourself so that you show up in the world as your best self. Right? So if I know that I'm just a freaking nightmare when the moon is in this part of my chart, I go, sorry, I can't do it on those days because and they should thank me because they don't want to be around me. They may not realize that. I don't have to tell them that literally, but they don't want to spend time with me during that time either. And, you know, like, should I hang out with my mom or my boss that I don't like? Should I have an appointment on that day? I should try to avoid it. But if I have to do it, then I can also go in with better armor, more prepared, more self-care around it, so that I'm like, oh gosh, you know, I have to meet with my boss who I just really don't like, and I'm super stressed during this Leo moon or whatever. So I'm going to go to bed early. I'm going to make sure that I eat in the morning so I'm not hangry, and I get my coffee, and I bring them a coffee, or I do something to sort of diffuse the situation. I'm coming in to that situation more prepared than I could ever be, even if I have to do that thing, right? And there's a lot of shit that we have to do, right? That we don't want to do. And over time, the other really cool thing about learning these things is you start to notice these flows in the people that you do have to deal with. Or like, you may be sailing through the Leo moon, but your boss is a fucking nightmare every single time. This is when they come storming in, you know, bossy and full of themselves and all this other stuff. And so you can always know, like, oh, call in sick that day, or like come in extra prepared to diffuse that person who may be irritable. Like, oh, I got you this chocolate bar. I know that you love this chocolate. It's like, oh, thank you. Maybe they're hangry. You know, like, what is going on with them? You might not know exactly what it is, but you can at least show up with the armor that, God, they're going to be an asshole, but it's going to be fine. And I think for me, it gives me a lot of empathy and sympathy for people, in the sense that I'm like, I don't know what's going on with them, but if they're constantly showing up during this moon with this attitude, I can help them be their best self by avoiding, they probably don't love that they're doing that. And that one might be more true for like your spouse or your kids. I know with my kids, like, knowing these things was really helpful because I was like, why are they so mean to me? And it's always during, you know, these certain moon phases. And so now I can just be like, oh, don't bother them during that time, or be extra gentle, or buy them a treat. One of my teachers always said, you know, their child was a Cancer sun and had a lot of planets in Sagittarius. And they discovered that if they bought like a bunch of little craft projects, like new craft projects, fun little things, and hid them in the closet, that every time the moon was in Cancer, they could grab one of those little things and be, look at this sticker book or whatever, that they would diffuse the emotional tantrum that was coming, that came pretty consistently every time the moon was in Cancer. It instead gave that person, their child who they loved, an outlet for all those emotions. So instead of, you know, not being a child and not knowing how to deal with all the feelings they're feeling as this Cancer person, who also had a lot of Sag, which like has a lot of Jupiter, makes it get bigger, and it's like, it kind of feeds itself. They gave this kid a tool so they could channel all of that energy into these projects. So instead, that kid would just disappear into their room for that 2.5 day period and come out with all these projects that they really didn't care about afterwards. Like, helped them feel better. So gave them a coping mechanism, right? So we can develop a coping mechanism, and we can use the keywords of that sign. Cancer people, they like to pinch and craft, and they tend to be pretty crafty stitchers or basket weavers, or cook. They like to cook. They like to do things with their hands like that are useful. So we can start to say, like, well, if this is my shitty time, what does the Cancer in me need to be less obnoxious or less stressed? This is when I give myself lots of tea and soup, and I take the day off, right? It's like, this is my mental health day. And it changes too. Like, it's not always on a weekend. Sometimes it's in the middle of the week. Each season it's going to be different. So it gives us the opportunity to make decisions. And then with our spouse and our kids, it makes our home life better, right? And they don't even have to know about it. It's not like you have to tell them, well, that's because you're a Cancer, right? You're not using it as a weapon against them. You're armoring yourself, and you're showing up with the right tools, right? To make things better, to give everyone the opportunity to be their best self. Okay? So again, you're going to print one of these for each week. And you can use the ones that are in there, or you can just print the same one over and over and just use it every single time. And the last page is just a notes page. I like to summarize. I use this a lot as the review sheet. So at the end of the week, I'll go and I grab the things that seem the most important to me, make notes about stuff that happened that may not seem relatable now, you know, or like world events. I put a lot of world events on here now, like earthquake in this country, you know, or like a big political thing, so that next year I can come back and be like, was that related to the sun in Sagittarius, or was that related to a planetary transit, or was it just an anomaly? Because those happen too, because chaos is an important part of our system. Okay, I think that's enough. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions at all, even if it's not related to this, please post them in the comments. I love your questions. I love you. I hope you have a wonderful Sagittarius season. I will be making a video similar to this for the moon ritual workshops once that is posted for Sagittarius season. All right.